morning, all, or happy lunchtime for my friends in Southdowns and others of you living in the future. And welcome to Kal-bardr's Corner for this episode of Coffee with Kal. I am Lord Kal-bardr Gellir, Companion of the Meridian Cross, Companion of the Argent Comet, Companion of the Compostela, and Reaper, coming to you live, as always, from the Barony of the Osprey on the southern coast of Meridies. Now, for this episode, I am joined by the Honorable Lady Sabine le Crespele. Good morning, Your Ladyship.
Good morning.
Before we get started, if you will please introduce yourself, tell our viewers who you are and why you are awesome.
Hey, everybody. I'm Sabine. I live in the Kingdom of Artemisia in the Barony of Lochsallen, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, nice.
And I am the current Kingdom DEI officer for Artemisia. And I overall just really love archery too. And that's a big part of my SCA aspect.
There you go. And I will, two things actually. So I'll be seeing you, I'll be in Salt Lake very soon actually.
Okay.
So I'll be flying in for their Highness's elevation or coronation and elevation.
Harvest. Nice.
Of course, I have to thank His Highness Sean for introducing us. So I appreciate him for that. He's a long friend of the show and helpful to me. So I appreciate him.
Well, great. We'll probably see you at Harvest Tour then.
Yeah, I'm excited. I hope our COVID numbers don't go up more and things get canceled. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we don't die.
Yeah.
So, on that note, well, on a completely separate note, because that note sucks. But before we get going, let's, of course, today's show is coffee themed, so we have to talk about our beans. Today, I broke out the last of the remnants of my Odyssey coffee order. It is the English toffee. I love it. It is caramel and goodness. I was telling Sabine before the show, my house is bloody hot currently because it is stupid hot in Alabama. But my throat also hurts, so it was a fine balance of do I want coffee or not, and I opted for the coffee. And of course, drinking it out of my giant Kal-bardr's Corner mug from my Westie Bestie, Katrina, patent soon pending. I'm excited for her on that. So she's actually going to get to have her elevation soon. Again, fingers crossed on that. So, what about you, Sabine? What are you drinking today?
Well, as we said before the show, it's super basic. It's just the Starbucks Frappuccino, vanilla flavored. Because I have only recently started drinking coffee in the last couple of years, and so it is still pretty bitter for me. And so anything that just I taste the sugar more than the coffee, I'm good with. So very basic with the vanilla Starbucks today.
It's more of a coffee flavored sugar milk than it is anything, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate that. I've started my mother like yeah, you like a little coffee with your milk, don't you? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to jump right into it. Actually, we'll do this first. So, of course, as you're watching, viewers, if you have questions for us, comments, throw them up in the comment section. We do see them. Also, introduce yourselves. Let us know you're watching. I see a number. It's all I get to see on here. So, if you don't say hey to me, I don't know you're watching, and I'm going to be sad about it. I will be. I'll cry just a little. So this is going to be a weird topic today. It's going to be super controversial. I warned you guys in the description. This is one that has been on my heart a little bit. I want to talk about, and I thank Sabine. I warned her as well before we even started this conversation. Look, this one may be a little rough, and she was willing to do it, so I'm excited to have her. But as Sabine mentioned, she is the Kingdom DEI officer for Artemisia. But we want to make sure that this is not an official SCA show. The views and opinions expressed here are our own and do not reflect her office or any of my heraldic office or any of those. We may talk about SCA policies. We may talk about things that are relevant to those offices, but they are not any policy changes or reflection of that. So, if you have any further questions about that, you can contact the Kingdom DEI officer for Artemisia and her official email later and follow up with her on that. So, all right. So, for me, this topic. So, is it bullying? Right. And I want to preface the why it came up, and then we'll kind of dig into it. Over the last, I guess, year and a half, give or take, since COVID, like we've talked about bullying a lot, and the SCA has done a lot of work in the DEI space with bullying and harassment and those sorts of things. I have noticed, and I'm hoping that Sabine tells me I'm wrong in this, and that maybe this is not the case in all the kingdoms, that I've noticed that the bullying policy seems to get used as a broad excuse. and stops a lot of things happening that maybe could be good, but we don't get to do because of bullying. So this topic for me came up recently when the talk about so Trimaris did a thing where they had colored ribbons for their event tokens based on like contact levels, right? It was, green, you can hug me, yellow, maintain your distance, red was, oh God, don't come within 20 feet of me or something. Like there was some levels of that. And people have seen these all over the internet. There's been wristbands and ribbons and all sorts of stuff of various vaccination statuses, right? The SCA said we couldn't use those, which, you know what, cool. If that's a policy we make, I'm totally okay with that as a policy for whatever reason. It was when they said we can't use it because of bullying. And I realized I've heard that statement or some version of that statement dozens of times in the last year. And I went, but is it though? Or is that really going to be bullying, right? So that's where we're starting at today. So Sabine, what are your initial thoughts on that?
That's a good question, because there was part of me that was wondering, like, what are you seeing it prevent? And so I can kind of see that where you're coming from in terms of, it preventing this sort of measure. I wonder, and again, coming from just me as a person, as a human, and not in my office kind of thing, I wonder if, the powers that be, the bod, whomever is saying we can't do those things, I think they've had to deal with their fair share over the last, year and a half of a lot of bullying and harassment and discrimination kinds of things coming up, things that they have had to really, really deal with. And so I wonder if there is a tendency to want to protect continuing to have to deal with that. And so I don't know, like, for me, I don't necessarily see how these ribbons would themselves be bullying, but I can see how they would potentially lead to bullying. But no more than, I think, wearing a mask at an event, or not wearing a mask at an event as well. Right. So I don't know, that's kind of my thought on it.
So that's where I was too, and I went, okay, I can see both sides of this, and I'm using this one thing as an example of a larger problem that we'll dig into, right? I sort of went through those exact same hoops that you just did. I'm like, I get it. I can see where this could lead to bullying, but also so could 100 other things, right? So it could literally, like, a garb color choice, or we've seen it with blue feathers things. We've seen it with chatelaine badges. So we had a thing here at Meridier's a few months ago where we had some new Kingdom, like, youth badges were made. They were made by a youth for youth, right? I want to be very clear about that. They were made by the youth because they saw a problem, and it was supposed to be a, like, obvious thing a youth could, or like, and when I say youth, like those young teenagers who are questionable, like those, like, they might be 21, but they might be 18, or they might be 14. You don't really know that level, right? They saw there are people that have that issue where they were, they get hit on at events or get offered alcohol when they shouldn't be, because they're maybe in the wrong spot, or just where near adults were, because of this sort of SEA culture. And when these badges got brought up by the youth, they said, hey, we want to wear these because I'd rather wear this and have it as a giant red flag of don't do this because I'm actually a child, instead of having to deal with that conversation over and over again. Right. Well, when this got brought up on the Kingdom level, people lost their minds because, oh God, they're going to be targets. It's just like, yeah, the kids are asking for this though, right? So the same conversation started around this thing, right? And it caused a big kerfuffle. And I was like, but no. So my problem actually it's not with the ribbons or the badges or the insert of the thing here, is we're dealing with, and I say we, the bod, the SCA, the organization, right? And this is where I'm going to be a little critical of the organization, is dealing with potential things like this instead of dealing with the actual problems, right? And I'm not saying, please, let me be very clear here. I'm not saying the bod has never R&D'd somebody because they needed it. I'm not saying they've never dealt with a problem. Let me, looking at the camera here, I'm not saying that. But do they do it enough, and is it being done correctly? Because if we're worried about these things, if we're worried about these ribbons causing a bullying effort, then we've got asshole bullies in this organization that need to be dealt with, right? That's what I'm looking at. Is it actually the ribbons causing it, or is it just terrible people causing it?
That's a really great question. I love that statement so much.
I was watching your face going, and she's like, "Oh my god, yes!"
Yes,
I
because
warned you guys. This is gonna be a rough one today. I've got thoughts. Go ahead.
oh, because no, it's the same because I've been thinking about, this topic leading up to the show and being like, and I've seen a lot more of what you're talking about, is it bullying, but more in the online space, mainly because that's been the SCA for the last year and a half, right? We've mainly been online. It's how we have been trying to keep the society alive. But what I'm seeing a couple of different phenomenons. One is what I call like this this road rage phenomenon, which is when you're driving in the car, right, and somebody cuts you off, you don't see the person, you see the car, and so it's really easy to flip them off. And then you make eye contact with them, and then you like have that humanity shared, and then you're like, oh shit, I was just an asshole, right? Even though they were an asshole too, right? There's kind of both. But so I've been seeing that happen in the online space a lot, where there's a disconnect in the humanity, there's a disconnect in the personhood. And so it's hard because I think there's a lot more people now, like you said, are there more assholes that we need to deal with? I think so. And I think in a lot of ways, they justify it through also being feeling that they're bullied.
Right.
I have a whole thing, but we can stop here if we want to.
Well, no, but no, I think that's a really great point. And that's it's weird to me that okay. So two things. One, yeah. So what you said about the seeing the personhood of the thing versus the car, right? Anybody who wants to know more about that, go back and watch the first show I did with Sir Helga. The name I can't. It's our first Unpack Your Shit show. That literally the entire thing is about turning people into objects, or objects into people specifically, and that's because that's the exact thing, right? You forget that person's a person because all you see is a car. So go back and watch those episodes. It's really good. It talks a lot about that objects and people thing. But yeah, I think you're correct. I think that's the thing is especially we've seen that in our ESCA or internet stuff is we've made that disconnect with people, and yeah, I appreciate what the SCA's done. I appreciate, and we have made leaps and bounds of improvement. In fact, we have Kingdom DEI officers at this point. Frankly, is an improvement in itself because now you guys are boots on the ground, getting to do work on a local level with the guidance of the society officer, who is an amazing person. But and again, I'll speak for so you guys, and obviously like here we have a lot here in Meridiace who's just done amazing work, and that's helped. It's helped greatly. So I appreciate the SCA for the improvements we've made, but like, are we doing the right things, or are we blocking the wrong things, right? And it's that the cudgel of bullying that keeps getting brought up is we can't do that because somebody might be bullied, right? And I'm using it. Let me because Brian brought it up in the comments here about the official statement that was made about the ribbons wasn't bullying per se. It was about exclusion or othering, which is not related. It's related to, but not wholly bullying. You're correct, Brian. Thank you for that. So let me clarify. I'm using bullying in sort of a umbrella term for othering, for exclusion, for we're trying to prevent those things from happening. Bullying. That's when I say that I'm not meaning the actual like maybe physical or emotional bullying. All those things. In my opinion, all those things are bullying. So we keep seeing this brought up as an excuse for we can't do certain things instead of dealing with the problems. And I want to see more of that. I don't know how to see more of the dealing with the actual problems because you're correct. So the thing you said a minute ago about the people then who are the bullies end up claiming bullying. And I know that conversation came up when the bullying policy came out, and the whole thing was like, well, yeah, they're going to use it as a defense. It happened immediately. We saw it. How can we get around that? I'm like, I don't know what to do about that. And it frustrates me because I want to deal with the problems, but also there's a real fine line, especially with the SCA being, and this is again critical of the SCA being a very litigious, concerned organization. They don't want to get sued. The SCA is worried about that. They got sued a few years ago. They're super terrified of getting sued. So they're going to block everything they can to not get sued, which is actually causing more problems, in my opinion, for them or for us locally, for the people, than it is for the maybe fixing problems.
Yeah, and I can see both sides on that too, because I mean I don't think anybody wants to get sued, right? Like, I think about it from like a modern perspective for me. Like, I'm a therapist, and so I do whatever I can to cover my ass so that in my notes and things like that, I'm not looking at a potential lawsuit, right? And so I think there is an aspect to it that gets gets difficult, with this ribbon issue that you were talking about. Because on the one hand, it's helping protect people, like having the ribbons and things like that. But then at the other hand, it's also helping protect the organization from a potential lawsuit, from potential like bullying, things that they're going to have to deal with. And so I think it's difficult because I don't know if there is a systemic solution to this outside of everyone doing their own work. So what I was, I see that you're kind of confused. And what I mean by, yeah, doing their own work, meaning, working through their shit. Like, so the SCA is, I think, for me, the way that I've heard it described and I've also observed it is like kind of an island of misfit toys, right? We're the people that in growing up, there was probably some neurodivergence. I mean, there are a lot of people who are neurodivergent within the SCA or who are highly sensitive kinds of people, right? And so growing up, I imagine, now I can't speak for anybody's experience, but I imagine that a lot of people have experienced bullying growing up, which then leads to a filter, right? A filter that people develop in looking at, oh shit, I'm going to get bullied frequently just because of who I am and the way that I function.
Sure.
Right. And so I think a lot of that kind of comes out because of that filter. Now, I think on the other hand, it becomes two sides of the same coin because hurt people hurt people. And so if you don't work on your shit, you work it out on other people.
Right.
And so if you're hurt and you feel like you've been bullied, then a lot of people, I think just human nature, tend to either retaliate or bump it up even another level, right? And so I think that's the issue we get caught in, is that there's a lot of protecting around rejection that people are doing, which actually leads to more rejection and hurt and bullying. That makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. No, I had not thought of that. And that's an interesting point. Because you're right. I think it is an escalation of force sort of issue, especially now. I think we're seeing a lot of people on the bod that we're getting younger, newer folks in there. And you're right. There's a ton of neurodivergence in the SCA. I've seen it. We've had crowns that are just, autistic and ADHD and insert your neurodivergence here and have done amazing work despite their neurodivergence. And yeah, the SCA is very much an island of misfit toys. I've never heard that said before, but you're absolutely correct. We're a bunch of weird folks. I was thinking just now when you talked about that we've got to find a balance somewhere. I think, and that's my concern. We've got to find a balance of protecting the organization from litigation, which is a valid point. And I appreciate the BOD for what they do in that we have to have SCA incorporated to keep functioning, right? We can't have local game if we lose the national game. I get it. I understand it. Like as a business person, as a project manager, I understand how that functions. But also I look at it going, as a project manager, I can also speak to, I've seen people on an executive level make stupid decisions for my project sitting over here because they're not day-to-day working with me, right?
That's
true. That's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing the BOD making decisions for people, even though they're also playing with us. They're not like just some removed executive body, right? They're also playing with these same people. It's almost they end up tending too far, in my opinion, to protect the organization and not to sort of let the organization play. right? And I'm concerned that that level, that shift, whereas, yeah, we'll still have SCA Inc. in 10 years. I'm concerned we're going to lose too much of the SCA, of the local group because of that, because they're worried about these ribbons and not worried about, you know, asshole McDuke such and such who just touched those 35 young girls. But yeah, we don't want to R&D them because, like that. That's my level of concern with that, right? And I'm not saying that happened. That was a extreme example. Don't hold it to me. So it's like I want to find that balance. I know as a fighter, I'll speak as a fighter for a second on this. We often make the joke of we signed a waiver. Like we're engaging in a dumb, brutal sport of beating the crap out of each other. It's dumb. Nobody should do this, folks. Stop fighting. It's bad. But we all signed a waiver. We have a card that says I won't hold the SCA responsible for any of my injuries. We did that. We all of us did that. Even the non-fighters do that. It's on the little card that you sign when you get your membership. Why are we worried about getting sued? Because either A, that waiver is useless, or B, we're worried about it for nothing. Like there's got to be some balance we can maintain there.
Well, and I think with fighting, yeah, it is a little bit more black and white. Like it's yeah, if you're going to beat each other with sticks,
it's expected. You're going to get injured, right? Yeah.
I think though, just being in a society, being human, dealing with other humans who may or may not potentially be an asshole or predatory or whatever, that I think is less, it's more gray, because if you're in society and you sign a waiver, is that waiver you could potentially get bullied, you could potentially get assaulted, you could, and that, I think that would be ridiculous, right? And so I think the difficulty too is that there is such a, there can be so many issues, and the balance between that black and white, do we get rid of all the assholes kind of thing, or are they just having a bad day? Mm-hmm. And how many opportunities, how many chances, that kind of thing do we give people when they're also people? Like when we're talking about the bod, yes, they're this, fundamental part of our organization, but they're also just people too.
Right.
And so I don't want it to turn into, bullying the bod either. Like I think it is important to be critical of the people in power, absolutely. And at the same time, recognize that they're humans trying to figure it out as well. And there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. That's the thing I have to think about a lot. Yeah.
So obviously neither you or I have ever sat crown. So I know there are things that I've heard from friends of mine. Sean is a good example of this. I'm sorry, His Highness is a good example of this. That I've heard some of the stories. I've heard from His Majesty Bela, sort of some of the background that they deal with on a daily basis as crown.
Right.
So, yeah, I know there's crap behind the scenes. The whole proverbial curtain we hear about that, I try not to look behind too often, but it's hard not to, especially doing some of these shows. I've seen behind it a couple times. So yeah, I know there's things, and I know there's things they deal with on a level. It's I don't know. I'm concerned. So we had a comment come up, and actually a question that for you, because I have no clue what she's talking about. So I hope you do as with your background. But Deborah says she has friends that won't play for at least a year due to the issues we're talking about. So there you go. There's one example, or some examples of we're losing people because of these issues, right? And I'm sure I could find a couple hundred examples of that. And that's concerning. And that's what I mean about losing the SCA is we're losing membership
we are
because of these various issues. And I don't know the SCA is dealing with that properly, but it's because we're dealing with the potential for bullying and not the actual bullying. I think that's really where it's weird.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's hard too, because I'll speak from my own experience. I don't think a lot of people know what to do when they get bullied.
Right.
So about a year and a half ago, I dealt with an experience of very explicit bullying. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Mm. And I was the Kingdom D officer at that time. And I was like, I'm the Kingdom officer and I don't even know what to do with this.
Right.
And so I think there is maybe a fundamental lack of information as well. And so that's why sorry, my dog is being a little distracting.
If he comes on screen, it's an official YouTube show. So please, let's my cat's not
Yeah.
in here. So we are relying on you to have a puppy here.
Yeah, he's over there. He's really interested in whatever's going on outside. But yeah, so that was why one of the first things I did in my office was create like a flow chart of if you have a question or if you have been bullied or harassed or discriminated against, this is who you can contact and this is where it goes. And if it hasn't been handled in a manner that you feel like is satisfactory, here's the next step and here's the next step, right? And so it goes through those proper channels. But I just think that there is a fundamental lack of information that people can do that when there are these assholes. And I think what gets really difficult is the nuance, because I don't think anybody, like we talked about, especially with the online kind of stuff, is that nobody questions whether or not they're the asshole in the situation,
right,
as well. Like it could be a little bit of both. And so that's where it gets a little hard.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
No, that yeah. And so I've actually two things on that. So obviously Baroness Zara, I know she's made it very clear multiple times that the DEI office is not the adjudicator. They're like, you guys do not deal with that bullying policy at all. That's under the purview of the Seneschal. You guys are sort of an advisory, if nothing else.
Right.
So if you have a problem, go to your Seneschal, start there. But and I know I saw recently the bot opened up a thing for like commentary. They're going to be moving out some of that stuff to a separate document to make it easier to find, and maybe that'll help. So I think that's hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking to that, so recently I was actually involved in a case here in Meridies. I won't speak to the details of it because I've been asked not to, but I was very surprised at the speed and the depth of investigation that happened. So I'll say that, and that's a positive. I'm saying on a positive note. The investigators were amazing. They did a great job at letting me guide the conversation of what happened. I was not bullied. I was speaking as a witness for someone else, and a lot of it had to do with stuff that was happening online. I think I'm hoping we see more of that because I know that's one of the complaints I've heard last year and a half is people don't trust the policies or don't trust the procedures.
Right.
That it's because it's done behind the scenes. It's all done very hush hush for good reasons potentially, but people don't trust it because they don't see it. I think that may be part of their problem. But I'm hoping maybe with some of the light we're shedding from the DEI office or just from the general conversations we're having, like this one, that we may see improvements those sort of procedures over time.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I mean, I think what's difficult is that we're now in a like a precipice in a society that requires more work than fun at times. And it requires more work to continue the fun. And so, yeah, making sure that these investigations happen and aren't just like brushed to the side because, oh, so-and-so is such a good person generally or what have you. It takes a lot more. And I think I remember hearing 6 or 9 months back that the society was looking for more investigators, to help with, whenever these issues get brought up, which I think is valid. I think that the difficulty can be our own biases can sometimes get in the way, which is, again, where we need to do our work. Yeah, it's the hard part is that for me, the biggest part of why I'm in the SCA and have stayed in the SCA, I've been in the SCA for 13 years now, is the people. Like, the people, hands down, are some of the best people I've ever met. And it's been interesting over the last year and a half how much vitriol has come out. And I don't know if it's just because now it's a little bit safer for it to come out, and so we all see it. Because if it is, that's great. Like, awesome. Creating a safe space so that we're seeing all of these issues. Or if there's also a piece where some of these people who are less than savory feel the need to continue that vitriol. It's hard to say.
I think we also can look at that from a outside the SCA perspective, right? So if we look at our news coverage from today versus 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's a drastically different picture. What's the difference? 2 words: social media.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming social media. I'm saying we now have a platform to where I can immediately go, hey, this guy's an asshole within 5 seconds, right? Previously, that was, send an email, make a phone call, send a telegram. Like, you didn't have the instant thing was not there. So if I got bullied in Mobile, in Alabama, in Meridias, you would never know about it.
Right.
Now you can see it, right? And I think that's the biggest difference. It's not that it didn't happen 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years. We know it did. We've heard the stories. If anything, it's better now than it was 30 years ago. We're seeing it more now because we can see it now. We have
Yeah.
that. I'm literally looking into your living room. I'm seeing your office. I'm looking into your house. Like, I know that we couldn't do that 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That's why we're seeing it. And I think that's one aspect. And I think you're right. The being the safe space, the SCA is becoming more welcoming, and we have the DEI office, and that we're starting to see people being willing to talk about it more. And I want to maintain that. I want to keep that up. And it's why I use my platform to have these conversations, because I'm willing to sort of put my neck out. I also want to be very clear, talking unpacking. There's even I have a show called Unpack Your Shit, because I have some shit I need to unpack. 10 years ago in the SCA, I was a terrible person, and I've admitted that and talked to people that I had issues with, and I should have been R&D 10 years ago probably for stupid stuff I did when I was, or I say 13 years ago, when I was a teenager and a young adult. Right, we were all done stupid stuff. Don't get me wrong. Right, I am not the one to cast stones here. And if I do something dumb now and I'm a perpetual problem, then sure, please deal with me. Let me know that, because I don't want to be a problem, right? But I can admit that. I can see that now. I want others to notice that. That's what I'm hoping to see. So, anywho,
well, that's the doing your work aspect, right, talking about. And I don't think, and that's the other aspect that I want to say, is that it's never done, right? Like, I'm a therapist. I still do my work. I still go to therapy. Like, it's a constant thing. We're humans. We're construction zones. Like, we're constantly working and improving and growing. And if we don't, that becomes an issue. Right. And so my hope is that throughout this period, this is the growing pains portion of the SCA, where there is a lot of, stuff coming to the surface, because it's our growing pains. Right. And it will help us create a safer SCA. But the only way that I think we can do that is if we all do look at ourselves, do look at our work, and we can help provide the information that is needed when, somebody does come up against bullying or harassment and is like, I don't know what to do with this.
Right. No, that makes sense. All right, I'm going to go back to a question we had earlier from Her Ladyship Aruna. Her Ladyship, that's fun. She just got her GOA, so I'm happy for that.
Congratulations.
So, can you speak to how restorative justice could be a path to improvement? Could that method of working through problems work for an organization like ours? That's all you, because I have no clue what she's talking about. So please let me know.
That's a really, really good question. Could you leave that up there a little bit longer so I can just think about it?
I'll drink.
Yeah. Can you speak to how restorative justice can be a path to improvement? It's one of those I wish I could say yes or no to, but I feel like it depends kind of answer.
Right.
And potentially, I think potentially it could be a method of working through problems. But I guess maybe, Runa, if you're interested in expanding a little bit about what kinds of things you're looking at regarding restorative justice, I think that would help me better understand maybe where you're coming from with the question.
Yeah. I think talking about what restorative justice maybe means on that might be a good point on that. So.
Right.
Yeah, I was hoping that was a keyword that you would recognize, like, oh yeah, I know what that is, or something. So.
Well, and I'm thinking about it in terms of just like our modern day society, in terms of the restorative justice with, our Black communities and things like that. And I'm wondering how that fits within the SCA. And so that's just kind of what I'm wondering is, with restorative justice, are you looking at people who have experienced significant harassment or abuse, that kind of thing? And I guess what kind of restorative justice are you thinking of there? So if you have any more specifics, I'd love to I'd love to hear it. Just kind of thinking that through. That's going to be something I'm going to chew on for a bit.
There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe have to that a follow-up show, Restorative Justice. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, might be a bad idea.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going through the comments here. Let's see. So we had a couple comments about waivers I want to address, so we can talk about that for a second. So from Master Brian, waivers aren't totally useless, but they don't cover every aspect that comes up. Also, what our insurance covers is an important question. I think that makes a really good point too. If we not only have the waiver, we also have our insurance, and I'm not an insurance person. I don't deal with that level of business. So I think that's a good point, Brian. And I don't know that. I don't think either of us know that, or what any of us on this local level can. So Brian is the Kingdom Seneschal for Onsteora, so he may have some of that information, but maybe not, because I don't know how much our Kingdom Seneschal knows about that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Signing a waiver for fighting injury, accepting that physical injury may occur. I can't imagine anyone signing a waiver accepting that they may be sexually assaulted or agreeing racism or bigotry is an acceptable risk of participation. You're correct. And that's where I think the weird point for me was, and I wasn't trying to say we should do that, by the way. My point was, like, there's got to be a balance somewhere of the SCA doing its due diligence to prevent bullying, right? Because I want them to do that, but also letting the organization function, like, without telling it we can't do anything, right? So, and we're seeing it to shift subject slightly. We're seeing it right now with COVID, right? The SCA shut down because we were scared somebody was going to get hurt, essentially, right? We're now opening back up little by little. We let Kingdom make decisions, and we followed CDC guidelines, and now we're just like, screw it, open the entire thing up, right? Okay, cool. Well, that's where we're at now. There's a balance somewhere of maintaining safety for COVID stuff versus maintaining our freedom to make decisions and function, right? I think we can see that same balance with bullying or harassment or whatever, of being able to make decisions on a local kingdom level, whatever, that help our populace, help our organization, versus not being able to do anything because the boss says you can't, we can't wear green because might get bullied for wearing green. Like, that's it. And I'm making a slippery slope argument. I get it. I know that. But I see that as a potential. Like, there's like, where does that line fall, right? So that's what I meant by, we signed the waiver. At some point, we sort of have to accept the risks of, you're in public dealing with people. There are assholes. That's the situation we deal with. Let's change the focus of the problem solving from the ribbons in this case to the asshole, not the ribbons. Because I don't know that eliminating the ribbons is actually fixing the problem, or eliminating the this or that is actually fixing the problem.
Right. I agree. I think what we need to do as a culture, and again, this comes from individually doing our work, but then also just as a culture in the society, is practicing, like, if there is overt bullying happening, we call it out, and we call it out in a compassionate way that doesn't just add to the vitriol, because I see so much of that happening, where, especially online, where somebody will say something that rubs somebody the wrong way. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's bullying, it just rubs people the wrong way. And then other people comment, and it becomes almost like this rallying party of, fuck this person. And it's like, y'all, where is our humanity? And so I think that's the thing, is, as a culture, we just have to really practice more compassion and come at it from a place of, maybe they need more education, or maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. I think there's a balance between having compassion for people, and so it shifts that person, and also having a hard stop boundary for those certain assholes in our society, where it's like, we will not tolerate you. Either you change your behavior or find a new group.
Right.
And I think if we can create a culture of that, we will see a lot of these issues disappear.
Right.
Because, like, for example, if the ribbons thing were passed, and then we had this culture of, we're not going to tolerate any shit talking, any bullying, any whatever, and somebody does that, and you had 5 people be like, hey, you know what, that's not okay. Can I pull you aside and talk to you about why that's not okay? And if you're still having an issue, maybe let's call it a day, right? Versus somebody says something bullying to somebody wearing a ribbon, and then 5 people jump down their throats, that just creates more of the issue.
Right. At that point, you're literally bullying the bullies, and we can prove that. Sure, I can see that. Yeah, we see that on the field a lot. We see, it's not an exact example, but like if you're having a bad day, you're having we talk to our new fighters about. Oh, excuse me. We just had the insulation done in our house, so our house is dusty, so my throat is dying, which is why I'm actually drinking coffee, even though it's still hot. We talked to our new fighters about, if you're having a bad day and you can't get in the right mindset, right? You don't fight mad. Like if you're fighting mad, you're not fighting correctly. It's sort of the same idea. Like we have to look at how we deal with other people. Of you shouldn't fight mad. So if you're going into a situation to deal with a bully or deal with somebody who is a problem, and you're mad, then you're also a problem. Like you're now perpetuating that same problem.
Right.
And I'm guilty of it. I know I sat through a Zoom meeting yesterday with my local group and just yelled at the camera half the time because I hated everything they were saying. And then I realized, oh look, I'm being an asshole. All right, I'm going to go step over here and not deal with this right now because I'm not going to be effective in this conversation, right? Right, and I think we have to deal with that. And I haven't done that every time. I'll admit it. But I think that's a really great point. Of we need to look at how we're addressing these problems, and the SCA has to let us. I think that may be where it falls. Is we have to get let to deal with these problems, and we have to perpetuate that culture. But like I don't know how, and this is where. Like I've always tried to I want to find solutions. Like I don't have all the answers, and you don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers collectively. It's like I want to figure out how to perpetuate that culture because I've watched. Sir Helga, I'll keep bringing it up because her and I have had these conversations a lot. We've dug into this stuff together, so like she comes to my mind when I talk about these things. Thursday, Friday, somewhere in there, she posted a thing that was a problem she had or with a person or something, and the comments did just what you're talking about. Fuck that guy. This just on and on. And she went, whoa, hold on. I just made a boo boo here because she brought a problem out and didn't frame the conversation. And she realized that, and she mea culpa'd. And like it was her, she made the mistake. And I don't think she actually made a mistake personally. I think she's hard on herself more than she needs to be. But I appreciate her, especially as a nine-year-old peer, being public about her screw up in that and framing that in a more negative manner. We need more of that. We need more of that in the SCI. I don't think she was harder on herself than she needed to be. But apparently my sound just dropped. Hold on. We'll give it a second.
Yeah, it dipped for a minute, but
I was shifting away. Sorry. We'll try this. Okay. So I think we see that. We see these people like Helga talking about these things and then being negative on themselves. And that's what I don't want either. I don't want people who are good people getting tired because they're always having to fix themselves when it's like 5 people. Right. So it's like, we got to, how can we perpetuate that culture? How can we show that?
So as you're talking, actually, I'm realizing I've made a mistake throughout this whole thing. So, because as you're talking, I'm realizing, you know what we're talking about are behaviors and not personhood. And we've been referring to people as assholes or good people, and that it's not that black and white, right? Like,
sure, that's the point.
There is bullying behavior, and yet people could still be good people, right? Both exist. And so I think for me, recognizing like, oh man, I just made that mistake, I think is important in terms of we need to focus more on the behaviors that are not tolerated and not going to be okay, and less on just the collective assholes, because what does that even mean, right? It could just be people, like, we may feel like they're an asshole because they don't agree with us. That doesn't necessarily make them an asshole, though. So I think it's the behavior that we're talking about in terms of bullying, which is like intentionally or maliciously demeaning people, we're rallying them, that kind of thing, dehumanizing them. That I think is more what we're talking about, those kinds of behaviors. And going back to, what you were talking about with the whole waiver thing, it's similar to, if you're in a workplace, right? Like, we can't necessarily prevent or predict that nobody's going to get harassed in the workplace.
Right.
It does happen though. And so figuring out what are the steps that need to happen once that occurs. And if things don't pan out from that, then people do leave, right? People do leave those jobs, and they will leave our organization. And maybe that's kind of what we're seeing, is that in the past, there wasn't necessarily a foolproof system. And I think it's being worked out and sussed out, right? Like a foolproof system in terms of what happens when these things come up.
Right.
And it can be so nuanced too. And that's what's difficult, is that some people may feel very passionately or emotional about the way that they have been treated and want that person R&D, when maybe it doesn't quite meet that criteria.
Right. And
that's where it can get a little bit messy as well.
That's a really good point, actually. And you're correct. I think, and I will admit to the foible as well. So, calling people assholes is literally treating them like an object, not a person. You're absolutely correct. And thank you for pointing that out. You're correct. I think people have asshole behaviors. I think that's right. That's the framing of that. And thank you for that. So what you just brought up is a good point, though. So you're right. The thing, we're seeing improvements in these systems. I know, and I'll speak again into the previous investigation, the most recent investigation I was part of. One of the things I said during it was basically, I don't think this person's a bad person, right? My experience with them has not been that. Yes, I don't want to do this or that. Like, yes, I've seen these behaviors in them, but they didn't affect me in the way that the complainant was, right? That doesn't mean that the complainant didn't have those exact things happen to them. Right. And right. This is going back to the trust the victim sort of thing, like always believe the victim.
Right.
And I'll have a comment about that in a second too. So I'm trusting that person had exactly what happened to them in the exact words they said it. Or at least that was their perception of it, right? I can't confirm it. I can say what I saw for my dealings with this person. And so yeah, there's things we can do to fix that situation and deal with that. And if it was as bad as the person said it was, I want something to happen. I want this person to go, because I don't want them causing that. Whereas they didn't come to me with that because I wasn't their target. Maybe I can't say it didn't happen to 6 other people that didn't report it, right? Or 75 other people that didn't report it. Something that my concern, and this is this came up early on in the pandemic when we had all this stuff going on with the president and the election, all that the first big SE kerfuffle happened. I was speaking to one of the local knights about some of this, and he and I are on two opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we are able to have conversations. And I don't agree with a lot of what he says, and he does agree with some of what I say, and that's perfectly fine, right? One of his opinions was that the SCA currently, and specifically the Knights Council in various areas, has a take it behind the woodshed sort of mentality, right? That they take that night out and they deal with it and talk to them and fix it. And I'm like, cool, that's great. Let's handle it that way. Oh, wait, that hasn't been happening. If that's the way you've been doing it for 40, 50 years now and it's not working, clearly there's something wrong, right? And that's what when you were saying that a minute ago, that's what I heard. I was like, well, that's where we're getting back to let's take it out behind the woodshed again, right? And I don't know that's fixing the problem, but it's what I want to happen. I want take the person aside, have the conversation, and it get better, right? I don't know that's going to work, though. And I want to see it work. Speaking of Knight, there was a comment from Master Lash, excuse me, that, oh God, now I can't find it. Hold on. What doesn't fix the problem is public demonstrations of justice. So we want to see that things are being done to combat it and done publicly. And I'm actually going to disagree with Lash on this. Because whereas I disagree that we need to have it behind the woodshed and completely in private, I also disagree that public executions essentially aren't doing any good either, right? Fear-based administration doesn't work. Thoughts?
I agree. I think there's a fine line with public demonstrations that can turn into a shaming aspect. And yeah, shaming doesn't necessarily, or fear-based demonstrations doesn't necessarily create change, or creates change, but not in the ways that maybe we want.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I think it's difficult because when I'm thinking about the last year and a half online, right? I wonder how many of these conversations would have been different had somebody private messaged somebody rather than publicly commenting on whatever post they made, right? And also, yeah, we can't shame people into change. Completely agree. And so, because I think it's a twofold process. One is when somebody makes a post, right, or somebody makes a comment. A lot of the time, and this is something I'm personally working on as well. I recently on Facebook posted an article about it. Is really working on looking at it through the lens of ignorance rather than malice.
Right.
And I think a lot of people look at whatever comments on Facebook or whatever through the lens of malice rather than ignorance. Now, somebody else at Really Great Night in Our Kingdom commented on that post and was just like, yeah, but there comes a point when ignorance becomes malice.
Right.
You know, if you've tried to educate people and they still continue to do what they're doing, that's malicious, and I completely agree. Now, if we come at it though from a help me understand where you're coming from, help me, like, please educate me with this, rather than immediately jumping down their throats this is not okay, this, you know, that kind of thing. I think that's, if we want to do it in a public way, that's the way we do it, is by asking questions.
Right.
Otherwise, if it's pretty obvious, like that was not okay, the public demonstration of shame isn't going to work. It's going to bring about more defensiveness. Right. So I'm playing this out in my head in terms of, if we're at an event and someone makes a comment that has a microaggression in it and they don't realize it, then, you know, that's where we can pull somebody aside and be like, hey, let me educate you. Or, hey, what did you mean by this comment? You know, help me understand, because the way it came across was pretty different.
Right.
And those kinds of conversations, I think, are great. When it's a little bit more, you know, then I think in that regard, that's when we can set the firm boundaries and be like, hey, you know what, that kind of language isn't tolerated here. And we can set boundaries without being shaming, I think, in a public way. But we have to not be shaming in that public way. And I think that's a little bit difficult.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like I talked in a circle there.
No, I think, yeah, it made complete sense. And I completely agree with you, actually. One of the things we've seen with that, and this goes back to the behind the witchet thing, and then Sifa has a comment on it as well, that the problem is those witchet conversations don't get documented. So that conversation in your head doesn't get documented. So if you have the conversation, and I have the conversation, and Billy has the conversation, that same person has had that same conversation 100 times across 6 kingdoms, but none of us know it.
That's a good point.
So it's like we have to have some documentation of the problem, so that if we see over a 2-year period this same problem happening, okay, it's not improving. You're like, yeah, because if it happens 2, 3, 4 times over a month, right? It goes back to the pronouns. So many transitions, and you change pronouns. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna call them the wrong pronoun, but I'm gonna work to improve it. If I don't over time, then I'm the problem. Right. And it's now a problem. If I do it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times over a month, cool, not a problem. You know, we move on. If I keep doing it, then that's that line of ignorance and malice. Ignorance is when I mess up. Malice is when I don't fix it.
Right, exactly.
And so if we don't document the problems, we don't know that there is a perpetual over time.
And I think that can get really, really sticky.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah. How do we document? Like, I mean, I feel bad for the person who has to document all of that.
Right. When it's going to get recorded somewhere, and the SCA is not great about documentation anyways. Actually, I have a whole rant about that too. So there's a whole bunch of problems there, and actually leads into Sifa's comment. Part of the problem is that those who are responsible for addressing the issues, whether they're the ones that are like DEI officers or seneschals or whatever, or just the ones that are taking it on themselves, are not trained to deal with these issues. none of us are conflict resolution experts. Like I've taken some classes on it from my project management standpoint, but I'm not a professional. I mean, you're a therapist, and like even you're like, I mean, I kind of know some stuff. Like there's a level there, right?
Right. We're all human.
Right. So if we had those trainings or counselings, it would be more effective. You're absolutely correct. But we're all volunteers, so there's no guarantee, and that's our problem, right? We're doing this as people, as a society, as a culture. We can't expect the SCA Inc. to fix our problems. We have to figure out how to fix them, but also that we've got to find some sort of balance of knowing how to fix them, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I would love that. I would love for the officers, kingdom and society to have more trainings around conflict management, conflict resolution, because hey, conflict is inevitable and it can actually be very healthy and it can be very growing. And if we come to that repair or resolution or what have you, I think it does make our society a more safe place because it shows that we can manage our conflicts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's like I want to say coming soon to Kal-bardr's Corner conflict resolution classes, but I don't have the resources for that, right? And then you got to make people watch them. You have to, and like we discussed that actually with I'm the Lantern Herald from Radia's, and we talked about having a like Herald certification process, right? Voluntary system of hey, here, take these classes to become a certified Herald. You know what the first thing I was told was? Yeah, but what about bullying? And I went, table flip, I'm out. Okay, fine, whatever. It's like we have to find some balance of offering these resources and having some sort of warranting system. Like we have warrants, but it's literally just a piece of paper that somebody signed. There's no process to become there's no like class you have to take to become a seneschal. You send them in the form in. If you're not a terrible person, they'll sign it. Like it's not hard. We need more people. We're running out of people to run offices. But also we need training. We need to require some sort of training class to do these jobs that are legal representatives of this organization. And maybe that's a thing we need to talk to the bot about and making a recommendation on either on a kingdom level or a society level of something, right? And because we have these digital means now, it doesn't have to be something that has to get done locally. We can do it via Zoom.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that would be great because you're right. Like that comment stated, we're a society full of volunteers. And so we're going to take whoever we can for an office because usually we're hurting for that office. And at the same time, if we need to give the people the tools to be able to do their office. And that doesn't just mean the paperwork. That also means, that interpersonal training because we're all about people. We're all about relationships.
Right. And of course, Brian brings up the problem. It's not the problem the classes aren't available, but that people don't take them.
Yep.
There you go. So I think that's where we have to require them. We have to require, if you're going to be a seneschal, you have to take this class. Or you're going to be an extra, you have to take this class. And yeah, that may suck. And it may be a thing where we lose some seneschals or people that, Billy Q. Public doesn't become a seneschal because he won't take that class or they won't take that class. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do we really want that person who won't take that class to be seneschal or exchequer or whatever? My answer is no. I may be in the minority there, but that's kind of how I feel about that. I don't know.
No, I get it because it's like, why do we want somebody representing our kingdom, our branch, or whatever, if they're unwilling to learn and grow?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So we strayed from bullying just a smidgen, but I think it's a relevant conversation. And that is an empty mug.
And it's all connected. It's all connected.
It's all connected. All right, so I'm going to do a little business, and then we'll do some final thoughts, because I have a one final thought for us. All right, so for those of you watching, if you're new to Kal-bardr's Corner, thank you for tuning in. I've seen a couple new names, a couple new faces out there. Make sure you subscribe. Push the like button down below or over there, depending on where you're watching. And subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook. Also, if you'd like to support everything we're doing here on Kal-bardr's Corner and all of the KK Productions family, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions, and get some cool rewards. Coming up on Kal-bardr's Corner, next week I'll be back with Her Highness Nisa for Consort Conversations. We're talking household dynamics. So there's a whole lot more to the conversation than just the fighter and the consort. There's a whole household of people involved supporting them. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, seeing where that goes. And there's a whole bunch of those episodes we've done already now, and we've got another one we're working on. So tune in for that. Ask questions. Go back out if you've ever done consorting for a non-martial thing. Go out to the Kal-bardr Corner Facebook page and comment on that, because I need a guest for that and some thoughts. So non-martial consorts or martials for consorts for martial things that are not fighting, like archery and equestrian. That too. And let's see. Of course, in our next Coffee with Cal, so 2 weeks from today, I'll be joined by my peer. She wanted to come on the show with me. I found a topic for us, and it's going to be another ranty one, so tune in for that. But I'll be joined by Dame Sabella Denton, talking about how the SCA is resistant to change. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. I've got thoughts. I've been in a mood lately, guys, so, it's a thing. So tune in for that. Continue to follow, like, subscribe, all those buttons and stuff. I wish Brian was here. I need to record Brian doing his push the buttons thing, because he does it better than I do. Yeah, do that. All right. So final thoughts. Here's the thing. So for me, this whole bullying conversation and the whole like restorative justice conversation, or just like, there's such a fine balance. All this has a balance, right? All of the entire thing has to be a balance. Of the SCA is we are a society. And what works here in Meridies or even in Alabama is not going to work in Utah. Like, there's just we are different people, right? And there are microcosms within microcosms. But I think the biggest thing we have, and this came up later in the conversation too, is that our system is currently built in a way where we're so worried about litigation and privacy that we're doing a disservice to the injured party. And there's such a fine line there, and I don't know we're maintaining it currently. I don't know that we're there, but I'm happy that we're having these conversations both on a local level between people and also on the BOD level about these things. And I hope they continue. And if you're involved, on a kingdom level or whatever out there, keep having these conversations. Keep these up, because I think that's helping. Sabine, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. My first thought is just thank you for having me, and how grateful I am to have been able to have this conversation with you, because it is very much about the balance between, what do we allow versus what do we set a boundary with. And you're right, like the culture, like it's twofold in terms of what SCA wise as a culture do we want to create, and then what happens individually within each kingdom and each branch, right? And so, yeah, because there are those microcosms. So I agree. I think the bullying conversation can be very nuanced, and what I just hope people take away from it is, don't become the bully through your own feelings of hurt or injustice.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily help anything. And I think it can be really difficult when we do become the bully, even though we're trying to advocate for justice or things like that. And so we have to be looking at ourselves, because we're the only people we can change. We can't change anyone else. We can create collective change if enough of us buy into these behaviors are not okay.
Right. And
how do we handle them on a one-to-one or even collective basis?
Right. Yeah. There you go. So yeah, don't fight if you're mad. Don't conflict resolution if you're hurt. I like that. Sabine, thank you for this. I'm thankful to you just for being willing to have this conversation, because I know this is definitely not an easy one, and it's why I put out a call for a guest, because I was like, I need somebody who's got some chops for this one. So I appreciate you stepping up for this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And of course, thank you to all our audience for tuning in this week and every week. Continue to do so. We appreciate you guys. This has been Sabine and Cal in Kal-bardr Corner. Have a great day, everybody.